International SEO is the process of optimizing your website so that search engines can easily identify which countries you want to target and which languages you use for your business. Most of us struggle with getting to rank locally. So do we really need to care about international SEO? Well, if a good share of your website visitors are coming from a different country to where you're located, then it might be time to think global. And if you have products and services that could be marketed overseas, how do you attract those elusive international buyers? In this episode, I'll be chatting with Nitin Manchanda, an international SEO expert, about everything we need to know about our global SEO to get our global SEO in tip-top condition. Hello, my name's Kate Toon, and I'm the head chef here at The Recipe for SEO Success, an online teaching hub for all things search engine optimization, and I love SEO. And today, I'm talking with Nitin Manchanda. Hello, Nitin.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. I'm going to share a photo of Nitin because he does look rather cool today. He's wearing a pretty natty T-shirt and looking pretty perky because for him, it's first thing in the morning, but for me, it's last thing at night. So
I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, well, if during the episode you hear me nod off, just bear with me. It's been a long day, but I won't nod off because I'm really excited about this subject. And it's a subject that the members of my Digital MasterChefs community have a lot of questions about because it just feels, to be honest, a bit hard. It's hard enough ranking in your local suburb. So how the heck are we going to rank globally? It's just impossible. But anyway, before we begin, let me read out Nitin's bio. So here we go. Nitin Manchanda is a developer who turned into SEO and is now responsible for the organic visibility of Berlin-based travel startup Omio, formerly Go Europe, across the globe. In the past, Nitin has helped some really popular brands like Trivago and Flipkart grow organically. Nitin also hosted the super famous webinar series in association with SEMrush, SEO Surgery in India, and now is hosting another series called Indian Search Marketing Academy. He's the founder of SEOsurgeon.in, the brand he uses for his SEO consultancy services, and when not busy reading SEO articles or setting up his own SEO experiments, you'll find him spending time with his daughter or planning his next trip. So you have a life outside SEO. Who even are you?
Absolutely. I love spending time with my daughter and my wife as well sometimes. Yeah, when I need, and sometimes, just for holding the bags of, you know what I mean.
Doing something fun. And it sounds like you're a bit of a travel nut. So you've worked on a couple of travel brands and you like to plan trips. So you're an international man of mystery, I guess, already.
Absolutely. I love traveling.
Yeah, me too. I don't do enough of it. Anyway, let's get stuck into the episode. And we're going to start quite with the basics. Okay. So when I talk about international SEO, what does that really mean?
Yeah, well, so international SEO for me is an art of optimizing your web setup. So the entire setup, like it can be like a list of domains or subdirectories or whatever, so that search engines can easily identify and index your content for the right markets and right languages. For example, if you're selling, let's say, football shoes in America and the UK, so you might want to call it soccer shoes with pricing in USD for the US market. And you might want to call it football shoes because that's more popular in the UK and the pricing in pounds, and then to serve basically the localized experience. And hence you want Google to rank the correct version for a correct market. So international SEO enables you there.
So yeah, it enables you to market to multiple audiences in their language, in their currency, and in the way that they kind of want to talk. But I guess many business will be wondering if they really should be worrying about international SEO. I mean, a couple of questions. We've got people on the call here. We've got Kerry, who is an SEO consultant. We've got Anu, who has a jewelry brand, which would translate across the globe. And I guess she's trying to decide, well, is it really worth me putting the effort into thinking about international SEO? And a couple of questions I would always ask is, is location a factor that influences your web goals? Like, is it going to matter that you're in a different country? Sometimes it will. If you're a plumber, you're not going to be marketing in Germany if you're in Australia. Do you have products and services that could be marketed to overseas customers? Or are they quintessentially your country only. I think these days we live in a very global world. I think pretty much everything can be marketed everywhere. Is there enough traffic and conversions for your chosen keywords to potentially target a new country? So looking at how things are already going. So for example, with my website, my old copywriting website, nearly 80% of my traffic now is American and UK rather than Australian. So for me, if I was still doing a lot of SEO copywriting, boom, I could have a great audience overseas. That built up over time. It didn't start to begin with. But what advice would you give someone on thinking about whether they should investigate international SEO?
Sure. Well, so everyone speaks about user experience. And when you're talking about international setup, so I would definitely recommend you focusing on the localized experience, because if you win local, then there are very, very high chances that you win people from other markets as well. So first advice from my side would be understanding the market and the potential demand. This is really, really important, because I would highly recommend doing this before you think about stepping in any different market where you are not present at the moment. So there are many tools which can help you here. For example, you can check Google Analytics to see from which geographies you're already receiving some traffic. So that gives you a good hint about the markets where you have demand for your product. And then also you can check SimilarWeb or some other tools like that to understand where your competitors are already present, but you are not. So this gives you another, hint about the opportunity. And then SEMrush has this tool called Keyword Magic Tool, or you can also use Keyword Planner to understand the potential demand for the keywords that you would be, if you're entering the market, you would be focusing on. So these things basically help you understand about the market and the potential demand. And then you can take, I think, better call whether you want to enter in that market to serve the local experience to get some high quality traffic that converts.
Yeah, I like that. And just picking up on something you said earlier, I think it's so important that we establish ourselves in our local market first, be a big fish in a small pond, and then expand your pond. Like, don't go after some huge market when you haven't even got a foothold in your local suburb. It's going to be pretty tough. And, I remember way back when I was establishing myself as a copywriter, first off, I started with my street, then it was my suburb, then it was the locale, then the city, until I got to the point where I was ranking number 1 for Copywriter Australia and beginning to pop up in, google.com and google.co.uk. But that didn't happen overnight. I had to get my foothold first before I could kind of, go global, as they say. But let's dig into some specific issues that people have. So say I've decided, hey, look, I do want to go global. I'd like to have, maybe different sites for different audiences. I'm not quite sure of the way to do it. So from what I can see, and you can argue with me afterwards, there are kind of 5 different approaches to hosting international content. So the first one's top-level domains. So you get your little codes to indicate to users and search engines where you're registered, .com, .com.au, .fr, .whatever. Or you go with a subdomain. So you put your international content on a separate 3rd-level domain. Yeah, so some people don't like that option. The other one is a subdirectory. So you put your content in the subfolder of a root domain. I'll put all this in the show notes, people. Don't worry. If it sounds overwhelming, I'll put it in the show notes. The first one is to use global top-level domain with language parameters, so .com, .net, .org, and it's targeted to the specific language depending on the URL parameter. And then finally, just having a completely different domain. So having different domains based on the country. Wow, that's a lot. I don't want to do any of that. Which one do I do, Nitin?
Well, that's one of the, I would say, the most hottest topic in international SEO world. And everyone is talking about that because there are 5 different approaches, and people, the perception of people of what is good and what not, it changes with time. And I think from these options, these are the 5 options we have. I don't think any other option that we missed here, but every approach has its own pros and cons. And so I think I would not go in details, speak about every approach, pros and cons here, but I would rather talk about what is my favorite these days.
Yeah, so, what worked for you as well? You've worked on some international brands, so yeah. What did you guys do?
Yeah, well, in our case at Omio, so we have this hybrid structure. which is a good mix of subdomains, and then we have ccTLDs as well for some countries. But my personal preference these days is subdirectory approach. So basically having one domain and having serving different loc through directories. So what you just mentioned about. And some of the great things that I love about this approach is one brand name. For example, booking.com. Everyone on this planet, when you speak about booking.com, they have just one name in their head. That's booking.com. That's it. And in our case, it can be omio.com, omio.it, omio.es, and in some cases where we have subdomains, that's even complicated, de.omio.com. Who would ever introduce a brand like this? Hey, you know what? I'm working on de.omio.com. Come on. Yeah. So one brand name is really important. Like if you talk about booking.com, yes, just one name, no confusion at all. So your brand team would love that. And then if you are really into outreach, so every quality link that you earn for your domain will add value for the entire universe if you have one brand name. So your PR team, your outreach, your SEO team will be really happy about that if you have one brand name, one domain. And then it's really easy to consolidate and separate reports if you're using, let's say, Google Analytics, because it's really easy. I mean, you get data for the whole domain. And then if you want to get data for, let's say, DE only, so you can just go to your domain.com/DE and you see everything there. So it's really, really easy to consolidate and also separate the report. And then users won't ever be upset because they will get localized content on your domain, on the domain they remember. Because, for example, in booking.com case, they remember booking.com as the domain. And they go to this domain, they get their localized content because this domain has content for every market they're in. So your users will love this as well. So one brand name solves all the problem. But then there are some confusions about this subdirectory approach. So it needs more, well, there's not confusion, this is reality, that you need more efforts to geolocate because you would need proper hreflang setup that you would need in other setups anyway. And for this, you would probably need a bit more efforts when it comes to geo-targeting in Google Search Console. And also you would need to add language tag, but that is again needed for all the setups. So there are some confusion that you need more, efforts for hreflang setup or language tag, but that is also there for other setups. But yeah, for geo-targeting, you would probably need a bit more effort when it comes to subdomains or subdirectory. And then there is another, I would say, myth, which is about getting penalized for the whole domain if you're doing something fishy for any particular market. Well, it probably used to be true a few years back, not anymore. But I would still say just be careful, don't do anything shitty because you are focusing on user experience for the local markets. So don't do anything fishy, which can, hurt your brand authority and people, believe that this domain is shit. I mean, they don't have localized content or they're doing something bad. So that basically ruins your brand in the whole world, basically.
I love this. This is going to be the first episode that I have to have an explicit rate on because you said shitty. So I'm going to say shitty too. I never get to swear on my podcast. Fishy, shitty, hooray. So just to be honest, just to be clear then, you said that you're going to have to make more efforts to geolocate by doing proper hreflang setup, the right geo-targeting in Google Search Console, and the right language tag. But most of those you have to do with any of those options. And we're going to talk a little bit about, you talked about how when you go to booking.com, you get localized content. We're going to talk a little bit about whether that should be automatic or whether you should give an audience a choice, because there's different approaches there as well. But we'll come to that in a second. So what is, I guess, the biggest problem that people have, so it'll take Anu, for example. Anu has a brand called Bedilia, which is a jewelry brand, and she's got her Australian version, but maybe she could set up an Indian version or a UK version or a French version. But I guess the issue for her more is how, what if I set up an American version that's in US dollars, US pricing? Maybe I do products that are a bit more US friendly, but essentially they're clones of each other. And I'm really worried about duplicate content and, how do I set up an international site when the sites are pretty much a clone of each other?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Indians are pretty flexible. So if you have your content in US English or UK, it's fine. We manage that. I'm just kidding. So yeah, coming back to the topic. So I would say here we have two major things. One, serve local experience. So even if you are present in two English countries, let's say Australia and the UK. So in both the countries, the English varies a bit, right? I mean, you have your local slang or idioms that you use there, and that's not common in both the countries. So here you should definitely focus on local experience. You just make sure that you are, touching the heart of your local users. And I also shared an example about football shoes in the UK and soccer shoes in the US. So that's how the people search in their local respective markets, right? So make sure that you are hitting the right, targeting for the right keywords and not generic stuff. Also, I would also consider configuring your geo-parameters properly to avoid any confusion here. So even if you have two different languages and you are serving content for different languages, so make sure you have like proper hreflang which tells, hey, this is for English in Australia and this is for English in the UK. And you can also use language tag to declare that, and also use geo-targeting settings in Google Search Console to tell search engines that, hey, this website, this version is for English users in Australia and not in the UK. For that, we have a different version.
Okay, so let's just clarify something, a quick question that has come through. So you're recommending that we have booking.com/country. That's right? Is that your option? Or are you recommending country.booking.com? Which one are you recommending?
I'm recommending booking.com/language and country. So because here, if you're only talking about country, then there are countries with multiple languages. What would you do in that case? So you would add another subdirectory or something. So I would not take it that long. So I would rather use a combination of language and country. So for example, in Switzerland, there are 3 languages spoken: German, Italian, and French. So how would you handle that case? And if you're just, doing this country
just the country. So country and language. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I guess a lot of people kind of consider .com as the international extension. It works for every country. Like if you want to be universal or global, you have to have the .com. Do you agree? I mean, or do you think that that's the American one? I mean, how do you approach that?
No, it's definitely not the American one. It's a default one. Even we use here .com as our X default in hreflang tags, because for all the markets where we are not present at the moment with CCTLD or something, so we have .com there. And even in Google Search Console, when you add any domain, let's say .de, so Google automatically detects that domain for German market, but .com is default. So there Google does not detect that automatically, which means even Google doesn't consider that as US specific domain, but it is considered as generic domain instead.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I think a lot of people are quite confused about that. So that's awesome. Okay, you've talked about a few things, and I just want to dig into them a little bit deeper so that people understand. So we've talked about the hreflang tag. And again, if you're not understanding any of this or you're feeling confused, do head to the recipe4SEOsuccess.com, where we'll have a full transcript of this episode and all the terminology will be explained. So if you're struggling, don't worry, it's all going to be there. So for the newbies, this is a little bit of code that indicates which languages your content is available in. So for example, if your primary audience is in Australia, you would maybe ensure that your site nav and your content is in the primary language of your audience. A couple of tips around this. I mean, as a copywriter, I'm often asked to do translations, and I see a lot of sites where maybe they've used machine translations, which are just awful because they don't get the slang and the idiom and just the rhythm of language. It's actually very hard for a non-native to write in a foreign language, and even if you're bilingual, you can still miss a few things. My husband's French, and he still doesn't understand. He'll sometimes say to me, what's those bendy things, those bendy wiggly things that go? I'm like, it's a snake, dude. It's a snake. But his brain just can't connect for that 1 minute. Very smart guy, but there you go. The other issue that I think a lot of people have, and I'm kind of jumping around here, is when you go to a site and it's auto-detected where you're from like your IP address or something, and dumped you on a site that isn't the right language. So, yeah. let's talk about the Ahrefs lang tag. What can you tell us about this? How should we implement it in the best practice way?
Yeah, that is something which can easily go wrong. So maybe you can refer omio.com to see how it's implemented correctly. And there are a lot of and Alida Solis. So she has a lot
Solis,
of
you said that so quickly. Alida, we love her.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she has a lot of articles about that. And whenever I have any doubt about international SEO, so she's my go-to person. And so I would totally recommend reading some articles. And then Google has proper guidelines on their forum as well. So I would totally recommend reading that as well. So it is something which can go wrong easily. So make sure you're using the right ISO codes for languages and countries. That's the most complicated part. And if you're doing that right, then I think it's implemented fine.
Yeah. Autodirects, though, they are the pits. What do you think?
I hate them. I really hate them. I think everyone hates them, including Google, because it's another thing which can go wrong very easily, because Google comes from US-based IP 99% of the time. Right. So if you have implemented these IP-based redirects, and then even though you are whitelisting Googlebot IPs, and then if something wrong happens there, then Google is only able to see one version of your international setup and then ignoring all other versions, which is really pain. And then in some cases, when Google is seeing different URL and then content is different than target market, then it can go even bad. I mean, Google can even rank wrong URLs for wrong markets. So you will get traffic, but this traffic won't ever convert, because a person who understands German would click on a link where the content is in Italian. So of course, if this person is not relying on Google Translate, extension for translating that content, then that would be bounced straight away.
Yeah. So it's tricky. I mean, one of the sites that I visit a lot, it's a bit embarrassing, but I'm a big fan of Marks and Spencer's in the UK. I built their first ever e-commerce site, when I was a young whippersnapper. First ever e-commerce site in the UK, let me tell you. Anyway, that was a long time ago. I was young and happy. Anyway, I like the way they do it. So you go in, it does serve you a pop. It does recognize that maybe you've been there before and you're in Australia and you changed to Australia last time, and it's got the flags, it's got multiple routes for you to choose but sometimes I want to choose the UK one because my parents are still in the UK and I'm ordering something for them. So don't move me unless I've told you to. Thank you very much. The only problem is when I don't realize, I go right down the path of ordering something and then I realize and find that it's not available in Australia, and that's pretty annoying. So you have to flag it along the way. But another thing to talk about was this machine translation thing. And you made a point earlier that or in the notes that machines are a lot better than they used to be. So are there any ones that you think are good that you would recommend?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, machines are becoming smarter and smarter every day now. For example, there is a translator called DeepL. So I heard really good reviews about it. But I take every SEO advice with a grain of salt. So for this as well, this tool, I'm testing it myself. So right now I'm in the middle of experimenting how it works, and from SEO and user experience perspective, because I really care about user experience, while focusing on SEO topics. And another tool I heard is AX Semantics. So they apparently support more than 100 languages now, and they generate content automatically. So now if this tool works like magic, works as expected, then my problem of generating content at scale is solved. Well, I heard there are companies like Expedia. Well, it's a big company, but yeah. So they have their own tool that generates content for them. And I see this auto-generated content on many sites these days, but they write like smaller templates and then use these templates. But I was looking for a solution which generates huge content automatically at scale. So I'm now testing this tool as well. So let's see how it goes. I'll share my findings.
Yeah, well, we'll follow you on Twitter or whatever and see what you say. And one thing that I thought was interesting when I went to YoastCon was that Yoast is extending out to service more languages as well, because obviously it's been very English-centric, and they're trying to work on, bringing in other languages, which in a way for them is slightly easier because most other languages have far fewer words than the English language. So it's easier for them to work out synonyms and all that kind of stuff. But, I think that, we are becoming a global market, and it's a shame to just always do everything in fluent English. Anyway, let's move on and talk about, you've mentioned a few times now, the geo-targeting option in Google Search Console. What is it? How should we be using it? What's best practice?
Yeah, well, so in Google Search Console, you can set your target country under the international targeting section. So right now it's available in the old version of Search Console. It's not moved to the new one. And there, basically, here we are talking about two different categories. So one is CC TLD setup. So where Google automatically detects your target country. For example, if you are adding a property for omeo.de, then it detects that you're talking about Germany here because you won't be targeting US audience or Australian audience with DE. So in that case, it detects your domain and target maps it with the target country automatically. But in other cases where you have subdomains or subdirectories, my favorite, so there you need to explicitly add your target country and language. So please note, for subdirectory solution, you would need to create separate Google Search Console properties for all your country or all your target countries. So if you have, let's say, omeo.com/en-au, that's English Australia, then you would need to create a separate property for that. And then you can say, hey, this is for English users in Australia.
So even with the new Google Search Console where it does the domain level verification and the URL level verification, you would need to do the URL verification. You would need to have separate properties for every single URL.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good to know.
So this is like one step. In addition, of course, you would need hreflang and then language tag, other things. But for country targeting through Google Search Console, this is much needed.
Okay, fantastic. So we've talked a bit about the techie stuff. Let's talk a bit more about cultural stuff. I mean, you talked earlier in the beginning of the episode about soccer shoes and football shoes, about matching things like currency and time zone, contact details, but cultural differences are a bit harder. What are some things that we should look out for here?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the way people browse your site or they perform a search on your website or they think about booking for next trip, for example, in our case, travel, right? So it varies a lot from geography to geography, like a lot. And so I would say it's not, just about language, currency, time zone, or contact details, but it's much more than that. So you should also think about using the local slangs, idioms, and humor, and sometimes, also about web structure and layout, because the way they search, the way they browse is different, and also the color scheme. So, for example, the lovely people in Spain are obsessed about red color, and I think Australians are obsessed about yellow.
I think you totally made that up, but we'll go with it, dude.
Okay, I love blue, and I think in India, the people in India love blue because our sports jerseys and everything is blue. So we are like, go India, go! We bleed blue.
I think British like grey because it's kind of the color of our sky and the color of our heart. Maybe, I don't know. But I think slang and idioms and humor are very important. What I kind of niched down to when I was copywriting was definitely kind of conversational copy, witty copy. My jokes sometimes fall so flat on this podcast. I'm sure people are listening in Azerbaijan going, that's not funny. What's she talking about? That's not funny. It's so important. The wrong choice of word. We've all laughed heartily at those funny products that we find in foreign supermarkets called things like, I can swear on this episode. So they're called things like poop waffles or cock muffins or whatever. I don't know. And in their country, it means something completely different. But to us, it's hilarious. So you really do have to think about that. And I also
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about as many personal touches as you can give to serve better user experience. And then all the traffic that you get would convert better than ever before.
Yeah, And I love your points about UX and color and imagery. The same imagery that works here might not work in another country. Imagery that here is perfectly fine might be offensive in another country. You just have to think all these things through. And obviously, therefore, it does pay to a degree to have somebody of that nationality who can talk you through the idioms, the slang, and hey, hire a good copywriter. There are good copywriters all over the world. Hire them. They're awesome. Okay, let's talk about another thing that people talk about a lot when it comes to local SEO and international SEO, which is hosting. Do you think it's vital for a site to host their website in the country that they're marketing to?
Well, what matters the most for Google is a fast website that keeps your user happy. So hosting your website in a different country sometimes hurt your site's loading speed and hence the user experience. So now user experience has a very, very high correlation with your SEO health. So if you want to, serve fast, and if you want to just avoid these cases, then I would say you can think about hosting your website in the local environment, maybe the same country or any neighboring country, just to make sure that your turnaround time for every single request to the server is not high, which is basically increasing your page load time and hence spoiling your user experience.
Yeah, I think as well, with hosting, there's other factors to consider. Should you maybe, you can host with a super, super local hosting company, but maybe the customer service isn't great and the site falls over a lot. Maybe a content delivery network or a CDN might be right for you. I don't think it's always the answer to host in the right exact next place to you. For example, I think my sites are hosted in Singapore. I'm in Australia. It's close enough and they're pretty damn fast. So I'm pretty happy. So I think it's about speed more than nationalism, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you rightly mentioned about other parameters that you consider, like CDN and what services you're using. Maybe you're using local one, but it's really horrible. So yeah, it's not about nationalism, definitely.
Yeah. Let's talk about a big factor with all SEO. People don't like to talk about it because these are things we should be earning people, not building. But let's talk about backlinks. So they're a factor with just general SEO and a big factor with international SEO. How much of a role do you think they play in driving traffic from the country you're targeting? And what are your tips for winning links in a country where you really have no presence?
Definitely. Links are important, especially when you get them from really trustful sources and local sources as well. Because let's say you have a local website in Germany and in Google's eye, they are travel expert. And if you're getting link from this company for your German domain, that adds a lot of value because Google trusts this domain from where you're getting link. And then if that site is giving you a link, which means that is kind of, endorsing you. So that really matters there in that case. So links do not only add authority to your brand, but it also brings some referral traffic for you. Don't forget that. And I definitely have some tips. I'm not an expert in this area, but I have some very, very basic tips, I would say, to acquire links, which can help you grow your SEO and then also help you increase some referral traffic. So first one, serve user experience. Like best user experience through your product. So I'm a big fan of user experience. I think you would have seen that already. So everyone talks about it. If you have a nice product and then share it everywhere on the web, so you get referral traffic and you get a lot of organic links. So just make sure you're serving like top-notch user experience from your product. And I would also say target trending topics in your industry and think about possible partnerships with the right companies. For example, if you're in Germany and it's going to be, the big day, Oktoberfest in Munich. So you can somehow try to connect with the topic. And so we actually did that. So here in 2016, we wrote about beer price index in 2016. And then we somehow connected that content with our market, travel. And we spoke about top cities to visit, and then this worked like magic for us. So we got so many organic links, we got a lot of referral traffic, and it was like magic for us. So I would say write on other hot topics and then try to link them to your industry in a smart way. Well, you are smart brains, right? So think about a smarter way to connect different topics with your industry. For example, this beer index price. Well, I'm not creative. I cannot think how can this be connected to travel. But someone here thought about it and then we implemented it and then it worked like magic. So think about these kind of ideas, these kind of growth hacks, and then write awesome content that everyone would love to see. So now we are starting another campaign about high speed trains. So everyone here in Europe is talking about high speed trains. So we thought of writing a content piece about that, because we have amazing content on that. So why not write something beautiful and then connect it to our website somehow and then make it viral? And through this virality, you get a lot of links and a lot of referral traffic as well. So yeah, I think get creative and then make the most of every outreach campaign you have in your list. So these are like very tiny suggestions I have for you on this.
They're fabulous. They're great. And I think if you're a smaller brand, if you're a personal brand or, one person company, I think there's a lot to be said for just building relationships. I'm a huge fan of relationship marketing and what I call good karma SEO, and just, reaching out to individuals, not in a kind of outreach, horrendous, hey, I wrote this piece of content, you might want to put, let me just delete. But forming relationships. I mean, you and I saw a tweet about you. I saw you on LinkedIn. We started chatting. It's taken us about 8 months to get this podcast together, but it's happened. And that wasn't because I wrote a great piece of content or did an outreach email. It's just through personal relationships. So don't underestimate your personal brand. For me, I've never focused on international SEO because I had more than enough work coming from Australia. But over time, this year I've been lucky enough to speak in the Netherlands and in New York. And 2 years ago, that would never have happened. But just having the podcast, connecting with people, being friendly, being nice, people, be nice. That's my top tip. Anyway, talking of being nice, that's an awful segue because I'm not going to talk about being nice. Let's talk about why China does not like Google and why Russia doesn't either. So in Russia, we have Yandex, and in China, we have Baidu. And for lots of us here in Australia who are kind of trying to deal with Google and maybe Bing, sometimes what do we do about these? How do we get on them? How do we attack the Chinese audience and the Russian audience? How do we reach them? Pretty hard, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in our particular case, so we have a team of local experts who are fluent in local languages. They're sitting in China and they're focusing on our Chinese domain, Japanese domain, and Korean domain at the moment. So, and we are not investing much in Russia yet. But I think the plan is to expand the team in the future, and then we will start focusing on these markets and these search engines as well. But in general, all these search engines, you talk about Yandex, Baidu, Google, Bing, or whatever. So all these search engines follow the basic principles. So every search engine cares about user experience. Every search engine cares about site speed, content visibility, relevance. Well, it's a different thing that on content visibility topic, when it comes to JavaScript, which is another hot topic in SEO industry. So they are different. So Google can
crawl
render
it,
JavaScript content. Yeah, exactly. But some other search engines like Baidu, Index, they have a big no on that. So, but other basic things, if you talk about site speed, UX, and then even the basic elements that you have on your website, like header tags, meta title, description. So all these things are the same for all these search engines. So if you're optimizing for, let's say, Google only, then also you're optimizing for other search engines, like, let's say 80-90%.
Yeah, love that. So do it right for Google. Focus on the basics: site speed, content visibility, responsiveness, good content, relevancy, all that kind of stuff. And it's probably going to be okay for all search engines, even Bing and Yahoo. Let's talk about e-commerce websites. We've got a couple of e-commerce people on the call here because this call is going live in the Digital MasterChefs group, which is rather exciting. So I'm a local brand thinking that it would be rather nice to get lots of orders from overseas. Where would I start? What do I do first, Nitin?
Yeah, well, so here we're talking about tips exclusively for international e-commerce setup, right?
Yes.
So, well, the first one would be to think local. Like I gave this example about football.
You're
shoes.
obsessed with football, soccer boots.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that example of Nike. So that's a wonderful example when you want to speak about this topic. So I always speak about that. And don't just work on categories or products. So check local opportunities and create landing pages to attract some high quality traffic with comparatively less competition. So I also spent a few years in e-commerce, and we were only focusing on product and category in the beginning. But then I saw this opportunity that a lot of people are searching for black, short black dress, for example. So here, this is not a category. Here we're talking about black, which is a color, and short dresses is a category. So it's a combination of category and a filter. So think about these kind of opportunities. Do not just focus on categories and then products. So it's much more than that. And this opportunity can be local as well. So probably there are a lot of people in Australia looking for short black dresses, but maybe it's like winter here in Europe. So people are not looking for short black dresses, but looking for something else, like maybe long black coats or something. So think about different opportunity. Think about seasonality, and then focus on your structure, and then how you're promoting your content. And then different geographies have different shopping patterns as well. For example, I spoke to former head of SEO at Zalando. He's now a colleague of me here. So he was talking about Switzerland. So apparently people order stuff on Zalando from Switzerland, and even if it's not a good fit for them, they do not return because they have a lot of money. So so think about that. I mean, every geography has different way of searching. And I think one interesting finding I have about Indian market is when you add anything like free in your search term, then you see a different, CTR or conversion or everything, So
Yeah.
free is the magic word there in India.
It can. Well, I think in India it can be. I think in Australia it might be quite different. Like I think there's something in our mindset, but it's maybe a British mindset thing as well, with the reassuringly expensive. If something's too cheap, then because we obviously have a big influx of products from Asia and from China, and it's just too good to be true. It's $22, like it's not going to work. So then you start to change your search terms, and I know obviously you seem to be spending a lot of time looking for short black dresses, Nitin, which does worry me, but we'll move on. But, maybe I'd be looking for short black dress, affordable Australia. And I would specifically say Australia because I don't want a dress from somewhere else because I've had a bad experience. So I think it's really, as always, when we talk about keyword research, is really understanding that searcher intent. And the searcher intent is going to change depending on cultural and international kind of, things, the way you feel, the horrible preconceived beliefs you have and all that kind of good stuff. So try and delve into the psyche of your customer, I guess. So look, let's finish up, and we're going to finish up with mistakes because we always love to finish up with mistakes on this show. So what are the biggest mistakes you see businesses making, big and small, when it comes to international SEO?
A lot of them. So yeah, let's speak about some major ones. So hreflang, for example, that's like a very, very big thing when it comes to international SEO. And it's really, really easy to fuck up with hreflang. And it can totally mess up your entire setup because Google starts ranking different pages for different markets, and then it affects your user experience, conversion metrics, and your brand as well. So make sure you're implementing your hreflang correctly because it can hurt you really bad. And then no localization. So we spoke about this, like, Australian English versus the UK English versus the American English.
Soccer versus football. Soccer versus football.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again.
Hashtag soccer versus football. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, no localization is another mistake that people generally do. So just make sure that you are serving the local experience to your local users and not just currency and basic things. It's much more than that. And then auto redirects based on IP. So Trivago still has it. And that's the only thing I hate about them. Well,
is that why you left?
Well, not really, but that's something that I really hate about them. So Google, as I mentioned, like Google mostly comes from US-based IP, and then even if you are whitelisting all the Google IPs, then if something goes wrong there, then Google would start seeing only one domain, which is for US market or maybe default domain, right? And in case of Trivago, they have 60 plus domains. So imagine if something goes wrong there, they are screwed big time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's assume that we're not going to screw it up and we're going to do it wonderfully. I've started to implement. I followed your advice. I'm going with the directory option. I've done my hreflang perfectly. Done my geotargeting, Google Search Console. I've done all the things. How do I know if it's working? What metrics should I look at to measure the success of my international SEO?
Yeah. Again, there are a lot of metrics that you can see, but some of the main metrics that I really see on, I would say, daily basis are one is visibility index. So I use Systrix for that. So that gives you the visibility for your domain in a given market. So that is really important. So this tells me like how my how the domain visibility of my domain visibility is growing in a market. So that's really important. And then rankings, of course, because that's why we play this game of SEO. So you can use that, SEMrush, and there are many more tools that you can use. But yeah, SEMrush is really good. So you can definitely give it a try. So, and then another thing is organic traffic, the most important, because if you're getting rankings and still not, getting traffic, then there's something wrong with your CTR. So you need to work on that. So yeah, organic traffic is another one that I consider, and then CTR is as well, because if you're, rankings plus CTR combines give you traffic. So I would say rankings, CTR, visibility index, and organic traffic are my favorite 4 KPIs.
I think that's perfect. And I think that's really illustrative as well, because I think sites will often do an awful lot that we talked about in terms of on-site optimization, but they really forget their SERP appearance and their meta description and their title tag. And they forget that it starts there. That's the first interaction. That's the first copy anyone's going to read. So if you've messed up on the idioms and the slang and the approach there, you could rank fabulously, but you're not going to get click-through rates. That, I think it's a good call for copywriters of the universe. Even though there are these fabulous tools that we've recommended, I think it just means there's lots of work for us copywriters out there to help localize content and make it work for every audience. Nitin, I am so grateful for you coming and joining us today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. We will include...
I've been following you for quite some time, and it's really a sheer pleasure for me, being here as a speaker. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Loved it. Keep talking. Say it again. No, I'm joking. It's good. We'll include links to all your various bits and bobs, and I highly recommend following Nitin on Twitter and LinkedIn. He's part of the SEO community. He shares a lot of good stuff. That's how I found him. I will say that people often ask me, where do I get my SEO information from? And I get a lot of it from Twitter, don't you, Nitin? Like, I find a lot of good people tweeting random stuff in the SEO community.
Yes, absolutely. Random, but sometimes really useful as well.
Yeah, and lots of arguments. I love the arguments. So just get my popcorn and watch people argue. It's fabulous. So thank you very much, Nitin. We'll finish it there. And as I said, head to the show notes to learn more about Nitin.